All right, guys, welcome back. What we're going to do today is I'm going to take, in the digital paint class, we are at a level where I have asked you guys to break down an environment consisting of foreground, midground, and background without any dictated light source, okay? And there's a direct reason for this. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach you and get you to think about understanding relationships of overlapping shapes, and those shapes consist of silhouettes, okay? They consist of everything from, in the brush pack that I gave you, we had cemetery stones, we had trees, okay? So our general goal in overlapping is to try to create depth. If I can create depth in something, and if it's working really strong, that's a win-win situation for me as an artist, right? Because then coming back, adding what I call the detail, okay? So the detail, in my opinion, it's sort of, you know, it's like the last process. I like that analogy or the metaphor of making a cake. You have to make the foundation of the cake, right? You have to figure out if you're going to have chocolate cake or there are going to be pieces of strawberry in it, what kind of cake that's going to be appealing. That's sort of the analogy for our composition, what is appealing about that composition. And then we get in there, adding the light and the fog and these other little elements. These are sort of the last elements that we bring in to sort of make our finished piece. And if you do this sort of workflow, I mean, looking at a couple student works up here, here's Charmaine's, okay? I think these are really nice. She used all the brushes that I handed out to you guys. She has the cool tree shapes in here. There's a lot happening up in here. You can see the lights right here opening up, and then you get into the graveyard and boom. It's just a nice transition. You have some larger stones, and then they get a little bit smaller, and she recedes you right into the back. And it's also creating this sort of nice pathway feel. And then once you get back there, you look up, and then boom, look at this structure that you have in here. You have this hill that looks like it's up on this house. It's elevated, and there's a lot that's sort of happening there. Okay, let's scroll down here. Let's take a look at this one. Another nice one. Really nice foreground elements. So we have a definitive look and feel of foreground, midground, and background, and that's what we've been talking about for the past couple weeks, right? Can you communicate that in your work, and can you get it across to the viewer? Look back at this one. I love this one a lot too. Now, what's cool about this is I can't quite make out what this structure is in here, okay? There's a bunch of different elements here. I don't know if that's a wall or part of a hill. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I decide to leave this part of the composition. Maybe it becomes sort of a lost and found edge, okay? What's important at this point is what I just mentioned. We have foreground, midground, background, and we have good balanced compositions. Remember, we were talking about a quick overlay in that last demo, just looking at the example of the rule of thirds, okay, having things balanced out. So here's a good example. Look at the nice silhouette up here on the hill, okay? And then look at how we come back here and you have a little bit of this detail, and there's sort of a nice curving. They're like upside down spheres. You're getting these C's in here. This brings you back into the house, and then we get it back again. We get it back again in here. So there's some repetition that's happening there in terms of shape that makes the composition very interesting, okay? All right, so, and then really quick, let's take a look at Jameson's, and then we'll start painting over this. So Jameson, now, he did something pretty cool too, is that he has the multiple layers receding back in atmospheric perspective like we talked about. However, though, what I think is very cool is he came in between a couple layers and he put a little bit of a haze with a cloud brush to sort of increase the atmospheric perspective. Now, by doing that, sorry Jameson, but you sort of cheated just a little bit, because we were just overlapping shapes on top of each other to make sure we're separating foreground, midground, and back, right? But by doing that, what he did is he was able to really set a lot of atmospheric feeling inside the piece, right? You see that? You see how well it's working? So technically, you know, if you've been inside an environment like this that's very cloudy, you could almost cheat it in atmospheric perspective without having to get in there and really mimic any light source. But there's still some other information and other things that we can go into his piece and start, you know, adding into. So first, let me start over here. I was going to dive into Charmaine's because what's a little harder about diving into this one is that all the fog is on different layers. And the way I like to work is I like to sort of put them in as I'm developing the direction of light coming into the piece. Okay, but not knocking that at all, Jameson. It's a beautiful piece, And you could see the strength and how well that's working right now. And this is sort of our rough phase, right? And if you're really communicating a lot to the viewer about what is happening in here in terms of, the graveyard and the location. If I can look at it in that rough phase and I get that spooky feeling, and I'm getting that, you've already set up a lot of mood, then it's been very successful. Okay. However, though, what would be cool is you getting in here and sort of determining. Now, by you putting in that haze, you're sort of telling us where the light's coming from. You sense that? Right? Yeah. The light is sort of coming from above. It almost looks like it's one of those mornings where the sun is up a little bit at like maybe 8 a.m., maybe 9 a.m. at the latest, and there's a big haze of clouds, and the sun is burning through that marine layer and starting to come out, right? I actually saw an environment like this when I was in Hawaii on the main island. Hawaii has on the main island, they have giant hills. Hawaii, they go all the way up, and there's horse country up there where like people we went to a horse farm, okay, because my daughter loves horses. She wanted to go horseback riding. So we went up to get horseback riding lessons, and we're in Hawaii where everything down by the beach is a totally different climate. When you go up this giant mountain, you're surrounded in clouds. And it was the same thing like this, where it was this early morning. We had to be there at like 7:30 a.m., okay, and you're looking out, and it's this horse ranch, and it's just all these big rolling beautiful green hills, okay, in Waimea, with all these, and old oak trees and everything, and these huge clouds coming in from the ocean. And you're up higher, and then literally the sunlight was burning through that haze. And we even get that here in Southern California as well. We see that sometimes in the morning, especially if you live out by the beach. However, though, by doing that, you sort of dictated where the light's coming from, right? It's coming from above. So by doing that, I'm going to sort of make that light source a radial light source. So all he has to do, let me draw on top of this. All Jameson really has to do as he moves forward and goes into a render in detail phase on this is get in here. Excuse me for a minute. Let me change brushes here. And my drawing brushes are not here. That's not good. I need my drawing brush. Give me 1 second. Let me pause. I need to go get it really quick. Okay, sorry about that. I had to get my brushes in there. Share the station with a couple other instructors here. I needed to make sure that they were in there. Okay, so talking about the lighting now, what's happening. So look up here. We have, now you can tell, this is the one question that might be hard to come up with a student, is that where is the position of that sun? We don't really see it inside the picture frame, right? But I'm going to guess and say it's right about here because it's early morning, right? Because of that, what kind of light source is that going to be, folks? Come on, chime in.
Radial.
It's a radial light source, right? So that's important for me to know right now, because if I was Jameson and I'm going to come in here and start lighting this thing, he needs to think about, hey, right up here I have a radial light source because that sun is inside our picture plane, right? So where are your highlights going to be? So you need to look at part of that house. Now, technically you could bring up the argument, we don't know if the sun is back over the hill or directly above us, right? So you could look at this house and you need to sort of figure out some of those facade changes in your head, right? So if I look at that, what if that roof was one of those detailed roofs that you might see going in the wrong direction there? What if it's one of those roofs, it's like this, it has 3 facades to it, right? So if the sun's right there, I might decide that this facade right here is going to be the brightest, and this might be second, and that might be third, okay? Looking at part of the tombstones, I can come over here. I can put a highlight right here, and I can go down part of that side there. Okay, light can be hitting over here. I can also, what are some other elements I could do? I could maybe put a couple stones or two if I had to in here. I could have the indication that there's a little bit of a walkway, perhaps going over part of this, and then maybe that walkway is like broken cobblestone that comes up through here. And then by doing that, see the depth it starts to add really quick. Were you already thinking that?
No, when you start doing it, it just like...
Oh, it pieces it together? Okay, so this is how my little head works, is I'm thinking of light and facades that are going to get hit by that light, okay? And then I look over here. What about this tombstone right here in the foreground? Look at that guy. That guy has a little line there, and if I come over and I draw a line down, boom, I can have light hitting that. Now, trees I like to think of trees of one mass shape. Okay, so for example, this tree, even though there's little details, I think of this tree like this, folks. See that? Think of it as a semicircle. Because if light's coming in this direction, what I'm doing is I'm thinking if I have highlights coming over here, the lights coming from that light source are going to hit part of there. One of the problems you see with students is they'll come in and they'll put too many highlights all over the tree, and it ends up flattening part of the tree. Trees really exist in these core shapes. So as I get into this and I start painting my light that's in here, I need to make sure I'm considering all of these elements to be very large spherical shapes, just as I am looking at this cross here. This cross has a facade. If I come in, where's your horizon line? About like right here, right? About right there. So if I'm looking at this, look, I'm going to have that cross is at a tilt. Do you see that? I'm going to be able to see the little sides to that cross, and I can go in there and highlight that. Okay, so since we're on Jameson's piece, I was going to do Charmaine's first, but since we're talking about it, let me just go ahead and I'll dive in here and start working on some of that right now. Okay, so I like to do this on my work where I have this little layer on top, because it reminds me of what to think about in terms of where light is transitioning and happening, okay? And then sometimes I might add another element or two that has a facade that allows me to render to make the piece look a little bit realistic, okay? So what I'm gonna do right here, I'm gonna put a layer up on the top here, I'm gonna call light. So this will be my first sort of, this will be my first light pass getting into Jameson's piece here. Okay, so one of the things I noticed was I was talking about that roof structure right here, and it might be easier for me to actually get in there with, I like to use a lasso tool a lot of times, and then I also paint with a brush, but I'm getting in here and I'm just noticing maybe like a roof curvature like this. Okay, and I'm going to try to get in there and get it as straight as I can. Okay, like this. And once I get that sort of mapped together in there, then I could come over. And there's a couple brushes that I have that I actually grabbed that have been around quite a bit. There's a gentleman by the name of awesome painter, always screw up his name though, Shadi Sadafi, right? Amazing conceptual artist, and he put these great brushes up on his blog. I've handed a couple of these out to you guys. These right here are some of my favorite. They just work really well, and I find them great for blocking in some basic light. So I'm going to come over here. I don't start with pure white. Why? It's pure white and it'll drown out part of your piece. I start with something more in the 10 and 20 range, and then I could come in here basically. Let me take off my caps lock. Here it is. I like to see my brush itself. Hold on a minute here. Make sure I got the recorder back on there. Okay. And why is my computer wigging out? There it is. There's my brush. Sorry, I get a little bit of lag with that recorder on. So what I'm going to do, I hate painting on the ants when I can see them. I hide them all the time. Because see, this allows me to get in here and to lightly sort of pepper in some detail or light that might be coming across, hitting part of that structure. So I'm going to sort of come across and hit a little bit there. I'm going to see if I can't hit a little bit on the top of that right over there. And then I might do the same thing back in here. I might come in here. I might take part of this. Might think there's a highlight in here, a little bit of a highlight in there. Now, I can't see other little elements in this piece, right? There could be part of a house wall here, right? Look at, there could be some rocks right here that are reflecting, that are getting highlights on them. Part of the structure of the house might come up here, and if I look in relationship to where that horizon line is, there could be part of a wall right in there, right? There might be something that goes in here a little bit, and then part of this, it might be on a hill, right? And then I mentioned a path a second ago, right? What if I have a little bit of a path that's winding down this way? Okay, so if I hide those now, remember this is all on a separate layer, my highlights. I could come in here, look at what happens when I go across them. Watch the magic. See, I can sort of hit them, and I can push a little bit more value here, a little bit more value there. What I'm doing is I'm starting to separate some plain facades in terms of getting them to pop out of part of the environment. Okay, so now watch. Now that I did that, keep the flow going. When I looked at this, remember I drew that line coming through here? I imagined like a little bit of a pathway coming through here, and then maybe it gets caught up in here. It's much larger in the foreground, right? And then maybe part of this pathway comes up over here. Remember, I talked a little bit about it being maybe cobblestone, so maybe it's not a complete path in the grass, like the difference between grass and dirt, but maybe some little cobblestones in there. I pulled away, and I hate it when the lasso does that. It automatically connects one end to the other. So I'm going to go in here. Oops. If you do what I just did there, all you got to do is come back in and come back in with your Alt. And sort of, I didn't mean to put that in there. So let me just get it the way I wanted it. I wanted it to have a little bit of connection there, maybe a little bit something here. Okay, and then look, I'm going to come over here. Maybe I'm going to get a little bit of a highlight in there, a little bit of something in here. The great thing about having this all on a separate layer is I can throw stuff down now, and then I can adjust it a little bit later. I don't have to completely live by what I have here. I'm just penciling in some little details, and I'm getting them to work at my benefit, so I can quickly knock them down whenever I like. Okay, so now that I have that, look, I'm going to hit hide, and this is what I think is really cool, is when you have that sort of hidden, you can come in with a nice sort of texture brush. And you see by blocking in here, now watch me do this real quick. I have my brush set, what am I at, about 10%. So this is what's sort of neat. Watch this go like this. And see, it sort of fills in a little bit of that pathway and that detail, which immediately gives it some quick depth in there, right? Well, the cool thing about having it like this on the separate layer, first of all, I got to blend it into the weeds right in here. Now, Jameson made this, so he could actually go and move this other layer up on the top. I'm painting on his whole grouping right now, okay? But I could easily get in here and I could decide, well, if my light's coming from here, maybe this part of my trail back here might be a little bit brighter, right? So there's still atmospheric perspective happening to the viewer, correct? In terms of where the stationary point of the viewer is looking at everything. However, though, due to the position of the light source in this piece, part of his trail in here might be a teeny bit brighter, and then the trail might be sort of fading off in terms of detail. Okay? As it gets closer to me. So what I can do right now, hit deselect, I can go in with my eraser. Where's my little eraser die here? And then I could come in here and I could start to sort of blend some of this down. Oops. It's at full opacity there. I'm going to put it at about 20 or 30. Start to erase a little bit. I blend in some of my edges here, right? Because look at how strong some of those edges are right now. They're very strong. You know, paths, pathways and walkways aren't super strong like that sometimes. They have little rocks that come in. They have little details, little plants, and I can get to some of that in a little bit later. Hold on a second. Let me just work for a little bit here. Get some of this blocked in. And the cool thing is I can come into my piece very quickly, and I can go on and off, and then just keep building up, and then push and pull those values to get them to work the way I want them to work. So I'm going to just continue right on here. Imagining a light's going to hit up a little bit of the surface here. Maybe some of that light comes down in here. Trying to get that cement texture as I'm making part of these selections in here. See if that can come into my benefit a little bit. So I'm going to hide that. I take my brush. I quickly come on it. I'm going to dab a little bit here, or maybe that highlight's a little bit brighter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of fade off a little bit of that detail. And I'm going to hit deselect then, and I'm just going to sort of blend in a little bit of that tombstone, see if I can get a little bit of a high on there to come down, okay? Come back in, and let me address some of that over here. Light's coming up there. There's a facade change there. Might have part of that having a nice little gradient on it. Remember I talked about the little ends of the cross? Okay. Get this to sort of fade in a little bit. Lost and found edges. Get a little bit of thickness on there. like gradient sort of coming down here a little bit. And then look, there's even the back of this tombstone in here, right in there. I could have a little bit of light sort of lightly spreading through here, coming back a little bit, coming through these two, so it helps overlap a little bit of those tombstones. Okay, so let me just keep working this for a little bit more. What I like about doing this is sometimes just by taking that lasso tool and going over little areas, it starts to define areas that could be like bushes and selections that I might not have seen, but then I'm sort of going over. This is one of the great benefits of working with vellum or tracing paper and Prismacolor pencils, is that you can take something like that. You see how that hillside feels a little flat right there? I can come in and I can go like this. I can sort of lightly go across it and see how I'm developing up those shapes a little bit more. So it's giving now a little bit of detail. See that happening in there? Okay, I get these little details in here to pop up a little bit more, and it starts to make it feel like there's some rocks or dirt or other elements in front of there. Okay, I'm just going to keep working. I'm going to keep developing this. Unfortunately, one of the things that I'm having a hard time on this piece with is Jameson sort of dictated the intensity of the light already, and which isn't a bad thing. Jameson looks great, but I like to do that by using brushes and then having sort of my own feel of where that light's going to hit. So because of that, I might have to get in here and then tweak and adjust things to make it look a certain way that I imagine it. You know what I mean? Because everyone's going to render something a little bit differently, right? We're not all going to be the same. I want to address more of this part of the structure in here. So now I don't have any selections. Now I'm just getting in there with my brush and just blending a couple edges and trying to figure out how some of these like positive and negative shapes might interact with each other to make it look like it's I want to create a little bit more detail and realism back there of how this road sort of wraps around and connects and gets into part of this house. I mean, I haven't gone into it. I'm just lightly throwing in some light in here, right? I'm not in a detail phase whatsoever. We can do detail a little bit later. Like you might have little edges, supports on part of that structure that you start to get in there. There could be, actually I don't like it with that particular brush. There could be, let me get a little highlight in there too. Okay, so if I stop right in here, I need to feather some of this in a little bit over here as well, because it hits part of that. Now remember, same thing I was doing over here. Look, there could be rocks right in here that have little highlights on them. You have all this stuff in here. See where that tombstone's sort of coming down? I have all this little other information and details. It sort of come alive back here. bring some of that up a little bit. Now what's cool to me is when I get those little rocks that pop out a little bit in there, now that I have those highlights, right, you could come back, be confident, do it on the same layer. I can come back in, like, look at that. See how that could be a rock right in there, Jameson? Now I could come in and I can select part of that if I want in some of these, and I can switch to black a little bit and get some other little shadows in there to help anchor those guys down a little bit. So if I do that, hit hide, come back in here, oops. I meant to go with a darker black, put that on like a 20. If I come in here and sort of punch these up a little bit, see I'm creating some little drop shadows underneath there. If I hit deselect and take my brush, see what it does to that pattern of that road? I start to divide up some of those shapes and it starts to feel, that's how I can start getting that feel of like cobblestone in there a little bit more. Okay, and then if I come back over, take the lasso tool, start selecting around some of that stuff and get the highlights to pop. Actually, I'm going to try to paint some darks on in these right here. Come back. See, by painting those darks in, you see some of that detail I'm getting in there now? Just by hitting over that a little bit with the darks right in here. So if I turn that off and on, look at before and after. Okay, and I haven't even came in to adjust it yet. I'm just getting in there, penciling some stuff in. I need to be careful. I don't want to have highlights everywhere and go highlight crazy, right? I want to try to get some lost and found, but then this is where I'll come back and then I'll take a look at what I have and I'll start, start lightly erasing and pulling some stuff out. Maybe lighten this up a little bit. Take your layer, do it all the time. I drop my opacity down and I check to find where things might look a little bit better. So if I drop my my opacity down here in the front, it might be like, hey, that fades in really nice there, but it still stays pretty bright over there. That's working. I get a little bit more detail on that pathway moving from here and getting back into here. Okay. All right. Let me. I want to jump over to Charmaine's for a little bit here, and I'll come back to this one right here. So let me save this real quick. Let's go over to Charmaine's. Okay. So Charmaine, I think this is a good example of what we were talking about earlier. Is that she has a nice little composition here. Which one did you want to do? The bottom one? Top one. Okay. So now in this, maybe there is no light source. Maybe the light source is coming from the house itself. Maybe there's actually a couple lights on. Okay. So all I have to do in here is, because actually, can you see the house with the lights on in there? Like a couple, and you don't, you could throw, if we decided to have a light source come, maybe we'll do 2 passes. Let's do a pass with the light coming at the left and see what it starts to look like. Okay. Now, let me check this right here. That's your top one, right? So you have all the layers. I don't have all the layers, which sort of sucks, which that's okay. So what I can do is, let me just throw a couple layers above this. Let's see what we can do. One of the things about having the layers is that you can come under your foreground layer and you can take a nice soft fuzzy brush, right, with your white, and see you can get the feel. The light source is, hold on, let me label my layers real quick. You can create the feel that light is sort of coming in at an angle like this. Hold on a minute, I'm getting a lag there in Photoshop. So I have to lightly paint around some of your, but see how you could do it under your layer? You can get some of this, but see, if I come in here like this and I start lightening up this and bring some little light rays across, not really light rays, it's more like a mood. Now you're getting a feel of where the light's coming from. Do you sense that? And here's the cool thing is it's hard to see sometimes until you turn it on and off. So by lightening up the direction of that sky, it starts to give that feel that a little bit of light is coming this way. So let's get in there and let me just let's make some selections on here. We just have that nice silhouette shape, right? And let's just see if we can get in there and add some other elements to get this to pop a little bit. Some really nice little details in there. problem is we don't know what's in here, right? So I need to sort of make that up out of my head and think like, well, what if maybe there's a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of an angled walkway that comes here. Maybe there's something that goes up here. Maybe we have the illusion of stairs that go up part of that. Maybe there's, something here that catches part of the facade. Maybe there's a rock here. I don't know. Maybe there's a little pathway. Not a rock. Could be a flower, whatever. And I get down here, there could be more of a roof on there. There could be, we can do the windows in a minute, right? Maybe this sort of goes this way a little bit, and we have some other little stairs to go back there. So you could make it up however you want, as long as it starts to feel good when you get light on there, right? And then we get down in here, it's the same thing. If light's coming this way, what if there's like, put opposites? What if there's like a huge boulder in here, right? Actually, I don't like that one. Let me do it again. More of a boulder shape. I'm getting sort of this tree shape. I need to get this hard edge sort of rock. Okay. Get that in there. Let's get a couple more. There. Okay. So all I'm going to do is hide those really quick. You could take any particular painting brush that you have. I have that soft brush. Let me just sort of go across it. You see what that just did? Let me just Command Z. Went from there, and we went, oops, to there. See how much detail that added? Look, that's just like a simple pass. And if I get really touchy and go, well, wait, light's coming up here, right? Gonna hit up here a little bit more. You can punch this up a little bit. You can always adjust that. It's on a separate layer. It doesn't have to be 100%. You can blend some of those in as you go. I like that soft gradient feel on how light's coming across here, and then it's going to sort of smooth over that hillside. So if I check my ants, okay, I could even come in here and be like, oh, I want to put more. Try to get some positive and cool negative shapes in there. Large shapes with small detail, right? Think large shape, and then there's a couple small details. So you get a detail area, then you get an open area of rest, right? So you see how I did that pretty quickly? And just your whole hillside gets sort of, comes out. Now, it's hard to get, I only like building the house to a certain point, then I like to go back in and blend some of that in, because I want just 2 or 3 highlights on the house to really pop part of the house. But what's cool for me is I can really get that sense of how part of this countryside is feeling, right? The side. Then when I get that, what's cool to me is you get to see patterns in there of where, like, look, can you see how there could be a windy pattern in there now? So look, I can come back in here, put another layer up on the top, call it darks, deselect. So now I could come in here and say, oh, maybe there's a, actually didn't like that one. Maybe that's part of a walkway that comes this way and then it drops down in here a little bit. And because of the light coming from the left, maybe your pathway is more on the dark side. In fact, I'm going to make it a little bit larger over here, and then I'm going to come in here and take out the shapes of those tombstones right there. Right there. Right there. Okay? So now, if I come in, hit hide, see that little indication that's happening? I'm going to have like this darker path that's leading up there, right? This is where you just get in there and it's pushing and pulling on these shapes, and hit deselect. I love going back with just a real simple sort of brush tool that you can go in there. Nice brush that allows you to So that way you don't get all these straight edges. You can just smear a couple along. You can push parts of that path. You can get some light shadows if you want under part of those hills. Remember, there's gradients in everything. They're sort of happening, moving along. Even part of this house. Don't go too dark, right? You can flatten up your piece. Okay. So I'm going to come back in and address some other highlights. Actually, I want to erase a little bit up here. So I don't like, some of those are a little too strong for me. I want to blend that in a little bit more. So what I could do is I can come back over and, oh, I don't have my, hold on. I don't have my smudge brushes. No, and my shapes. Okay, I have some other brushes that I don't have on this, so we're just gonna have to make do without it. I wanted to smudge those in and blend a little bit of those because it's too sharp of an edge in there right now. But I could also do that by sort of just getting in there with an eraser very lightly and just sort of blending in part of the tips and getting it to wrap around a little bit. And I can come back and address some other highs on there. So it's just a build up, right? Keep building it up. Uh-oh. Computer locked up for a minute. All right. Do too much talking and I just want to get in there and start painting. I want to get in here and throw some cool highs on here and then get a couple highlights in there. Now I need to get, you know, really determine, I got to be careful. I get lots of detail down here and it's starting to pull my eye away from part, that house should be part of your focal point, right? So I could come in and punch up the light a bit more, put a couple highlights on there. I was sort of wondering, what if I did light up a window or two, what it would look like, right? So, you know, that's part of that phase of just getting in there and seeing what works best. So I'm going to take something like that. Punch up this little light source. And imagine if you have like a little window right in here. Now it's very crisp, right? So if I get in there and if I take a little and it's still a little too bright for me. See, I can knock that down a little bit and I can move that around a little, duplicate that layer. Maybe have a little light on over there. You know what, even over here I could have a couple cool little lights on. So there's so much to get into. I'm going to transform those and make them a lot smaller. Duplicate those. Use a couple little lights on there. I'm just adding a couple lights in here. Make it look like that house is on a little bit. By adding those lights, if I look at it smaller, it starts to create a little bit more of a focal point over there, right? So I like that. So now I'm looking at it and I'm like, again, I'm always pushing and pulling, right? thinking like, well, without those lights, let me put a couple more around there. Without them, part of that house starts to fade in there, right? With them on, gets a lot more attention to it. That's actually feels a little too large. Okay. So I can bring all those together. Duplicate the whole layer. Just curious what would happen if I just duplicate them all. And they're really bright, right? What if I squash them? And they might look like secondary little highlights on the rocks. I trim them down a little bit more. Like that. That's not bad. It's like some little torches on or something in front of it, right? So, hold on a minute. Let me merge these together. So, I still want to punch up. I need to create a little bit more contrast and light back in here. So let me see if I can come in here. And on the light, problem is I don't have that layer that you have. But see how you can do that though? Charmaine, you can get in here and get some of that light coming in there. So it creates part of that feel in there, getting us up to the house. When I look at that, I don't like those hard edges either. So as I keep working on this, actually give me the idea of having this whole porch open right here. It's a light source, right? What if this is like one large light, like inside the house? Oops. Come back with my eraser and try to blend some of that in just a little bit more. Dull it down a teeny bit. Sorry I'm not talking, I'm just trying to work for a little bit. Sometimes I find it when you talk a lot, it's hard to concentrate. You lose that flow. That when I'm at home and I'm working and I got good music coming out and like you know what I mean? You're just, when you're doing a demo, you're having to stop and you're having to think about what you're saying, and instead of just say the wrong sentence. So now I started thinking, I like those lights in the house a lot better than having that light coming from the side like that, you know? So now I'm thinking about subtracting a little bit of that light and having the house be sort of lit with a, you know how we do tonal studies inside environment class. I'm basically doing the same thing now, just trying to, contemplate. Yeah, look at that, and it's like way too bright. So if I did keep that, then I would need to lose those highlights in there. Hold on a minute. Some of those I put on. The wrong layers, so I'm going to merge them back onto here. So one of two things that I would, Charmaine, I would either, on this one, I would either keep that light coming from there and they get little highlights on here, or I'm wondering if you dull those lights down, you get a little bit more contrast by having lights on up there. But then what you can do is, hold on, let me select part of this roadway here, all that information there. Okay, I'm going to copy that, turn that layer off, put a new layer. And what I'm going to do is, if you go to Paste Special and go into Paste into Place, it'll paste those highlights exactly where they were before. So I just took that section from this way, took off all this light back here. See that? So by pasting them into place, I can sort of have this be the dominant read with maybe lights on in there and then a little bit of a trail leading up to it. Okay. I don't know, I come back to it and I sort of like the light coming from the side as well. Because it makes, by doing that, it's more of a contrast shape and gets that to pop a little bit, right? Which is sort of cool. Then I was just curious, I sort of wanted to get in here. Lighten some of this up. All right, let me just merge everything and see what we have. I'm going through, I'm just erasing some parts where I thought it was a little too bright, you know? Getting it to blend in a little bit more. It's sort of cool. I sort of like it like that, with the lights coming on, and then I can get some other cool reflections up here on the trees and stuff, and just sort of leave it. So if I take these off, the layers that I have on, that's where we sort of were, right? And just by getting in there and getting some of those little, just some little highlights over parts of that hill, some little highlights, getting these tombstones to develop a little bit more, and then getting some little highlights on the house very quickly. That right there starts to work for me. The only thing I'm questioning are some of the highlights on the house, if I make them a teeny bit smaller in a couple places, right? What would be cool is you got to research that. Look at the Victorian house like that. It might have a very specific window type. And that window type could maybe have like a rounded top, and it could have, like, instead of me having these little squares that I did really quick peppered over there, maybe there's like one large sort of Victorian shaped window with a rounded top, and then that sort of popping out. And then now I'm thinking of maybe light coming down, and it highlights part of like an archway, like a walkway with like the little, you know, side rails on it, and then that comes down, and you can almost have, heck, you can almost put little lights going down part of a pathway that leads you to that. So I think on this piece, a little bit of self-discovery in here, trying to find a good light method to sort of bring this alive. What if all this was like one larger road that comes in here? In contrast against part of those silhouettes, right? So let me just see here. See what layer I'm on, just double check it. Put another layer up here. I'll call this path. I like that a lot more like that. Because see what it does? I was going for the dark path, but then I switched it up instead to a light path, right? The reason why is it, hold on, deselect. Come on, get in there. I wanted to smudge those guys together. Now by having this pathway in here, if I come in here and erase, sorry. See, what I like about that is now the pathway looks sort of illuminated from like part of the light or maybe the moon, and it pops up on top, and then it brings me right up into here where you have this. Gosh, I'm almost going to do this now. What if I have a door like this? It's like nice rounded door that's like a little bit, and then it has a little smaller like little door guy like this. It's like super bright. Oops. That's sort of cool. And then I could dull this other one down a little bit more. Actually, I put those in there so fast. What if I put like little bars for the windows and delete those out? Yeah. Too much contrast. Let me just knock them down a little bit. there could be some really I don't know, that's sort of cool. I like that a lot more, changing it up a little bit. That's a tough one because I was originally starting with the light coming from the side, but then I sort of like if the light's from there and coming across, and see how nice this sort of reads sort of soft in here. And I think I could still push, if I was under that layer, I could still come in with a brush and lightly sort of hold on. And merge these together. Just want to get a little bit of haze back there. Some of that just lightly blending in, right? Now what's cool is if I went in there, now that I sort of found what I'm starting to like here, trying to get the part of that brick pattern that might be in there, right? Now I was just curious if I hit this, like some of that getting lost in there, and if I just take a little bit of this guy here. One little trick if you're going to put in fog into anything or a little bit of clouds. So this is where I am on Charmaine's. I adjusted a couple things. I moved the light down a little bit more and then lit up the house a little and lit up part of that trail. But if you use another layer, so if you do something, some of the fog and different types of fog or cloud related brushes, they can come down really strong. Some are on a rotate. So you get something like that and you're like, okay, but it's too big. Well, if it's on another layer, what's cool is you can sort of transform it and you can get it to fit in like the right place that you sort of want it. And if you try to get it to where it feels good, and then what you can do is you can dilute it down a little bit, especially in some of your layers, like especially back there. If I go like that, I can make it look like it's a real thin stretch, sort of fog coming over part of that. Looks sort of cool. Go back here, let's hit it again. This brush is pretty cool, it does a good job. Just throw a little bit of fog in there, coming through. Some of that, don't do this. No, too strong. All those trees in there, I want to see if I can get a little bit more white fog over some of that to pull it back a little. And I want to see if I can stamp one nice little fog print, like right in there. I have to go a little bit brighter though. Put that on a separate layer. what I can do is get that sort of in there a little bit, make it look like, oops, that fog is a little bit thicker right in there. And then since it's on a separate layer, I can just drop the opacity in and get it to blend in where I sort of want it. Okay. So I liked it a little richer like that. Just take my eraser, sort of dabble around the sides of it and knock it down just a little bit more. Okay, cool. So, what I like to do, no, I'm not finished. I need to finish this though to move on. I want to do another one. Is that I like that. This was a tough one because in my head I was envisioning light. Don't mind those darker values popping in there just a teeny bit. Let me just erase a little bit of what's in there. Help support part of the trail having a little bit of those. Because what was happening is that I started with a light source coming from an opposite direction. And I was imagining something more like that. But I was having a hard time trying to get the shape to pop of the house, right? Well, you know, I think that's going to happen a lot when you're working on your stuff, and you have to find that happy medium. I like the way this was feeling down in here. So remember how I copied and pasted that? So I just sort of changed the light source a little bit. Instead of having that, you know, and that light really coming, I didn't really like the way that shape was sort of being treated, sort of being left alone, right? So by taking that off and then coming in here and punching up a little bit more of keeping that softness in here, a little bit of that cobblestone effect, and having the light come from the house like that. And sort of, to me, one of the focal areas I'm hitting is that hot spot right there, right? And I could even enlarge that. One thing I'm thinking, if I were to leave this alone for, you know, come back with a fresh set of eyes, I'd probably make a couple of these windows maybe a little smaller. So that way this gets a lot of attention. There's like this huge door, and there's this, you know, looks like it's part of it open, a light sort of screeching across part of this trail and opening some of that a little bit. I like how this fades into here. You know, I could even still come into here and paint a little bit of information on part of this light. But you have part of that base, you have part of that cemented top there, some of this other detail or rock information here. Now, not like that. Way too bright. Just come along and get that to go across this a little bit. Deselect it a little. See if I can get a little bit of a nice brush to sort of gradient coming in there maybe. So you just get a little bit of indication of what some of the surfaces are. There's a little bit of stone there. I'm hitting it very lightly right now. It's at, what, 3%? Just going over a little bit of that black, and then I'm going to come in with the eraser, push it down just a little bit more. Just makes it, I don't know if that even shows on the monitor. It does a little bit. The monitor's a lot lighter than my screen is. Okay? So that's pretty cool. I like that. Something you could do as well on your house right here, Charmaine, underneath, you could put a little highlight also, like another window right under those branches, because you have it on layer. If you put it right under there, those branches are on top, you're going to get an instant contrast. I can't really do it. I can try. Problem is, if I put that highlight right here, it's going on top of part of your branches. See if I come in here and like, why is it not? Hold on a minute. There we go. Come on. Sorry, I'm getting a lag because of the Photoshop, the recorder in Camtasia. There. See if I punch up that little window right there? And if you can imagine, like right there, I get this sort of hot little spot. Not that hot. It looks like a little bit of a window under here. Problem is, you could do it easily because you have all these nice little dark branches going over it. So that way it looks like a fuzzy window, maybe part on, not nearly as hot as that door. Okay, and then that's going to help the composition quite a bit. But already right there, I mean, for that piece, what are we into this? We're about 30 minutes into it in terms of rendering and adding some detail. And here, let me just, always like doing this, merge all your layers together and look at that sort of before where you're at, and then look at that after. You know, and to me, that's what's sort of important, is that right there, I feel like that location starts to come alive quite a bit with that information that's in there. And look at the detail. I mean, I understand the facade changes in here. I see a path. I have a better idea of the house. I have highlights on some of the midground and the tombstones in the midground. I have a little bit of detail coming, not detail, but just indication that there's some changes in texture on some of the front there. A couple other things if you really wanted to. One thing I noticed, even with the darks on, what I like is, you know, night skies tend to have pretty good gradients in them. So I'm thinking of coming in here and throwing a little bit of a darker gradient coming down from the sky. And all that's going to do is make part of the whites on the house pop, right? You know? And then, you know, something else I really like, hold on a minute, it's getting a little, it gets a little hazy because I can't paint on top of underneath that layer there, so I have to darken it up a little bit more. It's a little too dark, but do that under your foreground, right? Something else cool that you can do is, you know, if you just come along, you can get the feel of a little bit of dust, or you can put a little bit of dust in the background. You can put some clouds in there. You can put birds, you know. So up to you what you'd like to address. You know, if you want to do it, go in there very light. Let's just see what happens if we, sometimes on a moody scene like this, you know, you can have these sort of dark cloud formations. Oops, not that big, a lot smaller. What's cool about having dark clouds is it gives you that feeling like things being back behind part of your location. Erase some of this, blend a little bit of it in. And then, see, I did it on a separate layer so I could sort of squash it and move it a little bit to where I want it. There, see how that cloud sort of looks like the dark sky, and then it sort of blends in a little bit just by doing that very quickly. And then what's cool, if you get those dark clouds, right, and you have the lights on from the house, you can come back on top of them, and you can put a couple little highlights onto the cloud to make them look a little bit more realistic. So definitely with another layer. Hold on a minute. Sometimes I like using the mouse for don't ask me why. I feel like I get a little bit more accurate hit. Now remember, that's on a separate layer, right? So look, I can squash them a little bit. I can move those highlights around a little. I can move those down a teeny bit more. Oops. Come on. Select them again, sorry. I can move those down a little bit like that. And then I can fade them in. Go to eraser, put it at like a 1. And I'm just going to lightly come in here and sort of fade those highs into there. See how that's sort of cool? It just gets the clouds to pop in there a little bit. So I mean, you can put clouds in there. Sometimes I'll do like a dust. I found this one brush I thought was pretty cool. It's a falling leaf brush, right? But if you grab like a light color sometimes, and it's really small, just can make it look like there's some crap floating around on the sky, or you know what I mean? A little bit of stuff. That doesn't really apply to that. It works more in like forests or jungles. But you know, let me see if I have a bird brush in there. Where's my birds? I know I have birds somewhere. Problem is I have too many brushes in here. Where are the birds? Where are the birds? There's some birds. Birds are great. See, you can come in here. Hold on, leave those alone. Those are the clouds, right? So you can turn your clouds on and off, or even fade them in. You put another little line layer there. Birds are great. It's a great way to show scales. Lots of artists use them because it's not just birds. You have different types of birds and anything that could dictate a little bit of scale. Just by coming up here and stamping that a couple times, it might be a little hard to see. Now if I darken them a teeny bit, see, I can bring them into the picture. What's really cool is you can literally just, you know, take a couple of the ones that you like, and you can just copy and paste them, and then, oops, copy, paste again. So you can move a couple over here, rotate them the other way a little bit, you know, and then you get a little bit of birds in there, which, you know, you combine a little bit of the birds, a little bit of the clouds, a little bit of this and that, just adds a little bit more to part of your atmosphere, you know. You can build it up. I'm even looking at that cloud layer now, and I sort of like the birds being on top of them a little bit, but I'm wondering what would happen. Let me go back to that cloud. Which was it? There it is. If I lighten them just a teeny bit more, like that. So the clouds are still in there, but now the birds sort of pop up on top of them too. Gives me a little bit of detail back in that little area. Okay, so I look at it, just sort of zoom out, you know. I like to look at things a little bit smaller, because then I realize, see that straight line in there, that fog? I'm not liking that right now. So if I go to that layer 3, or was it? Actually, it's not gonna. Let me find that layer. There it is. So looking at your image a little bit smaller, going into erase mode, taking a little bit of this out right here, right? Try to get more of an, instead of a straight line, make it feel a little bit more organic. So I'm gonna try to round some of this off a little bit, get it to flow in there a little bit. But I think that's cool. Part of me is tempted to erase one or two of those lights to get it to dull down a little bit more, so I'm not pulling too much out of that, those highlights, okay? So, let's do that really quick. It was that layer, nope, layer 14 there. I'm not labeling my layers because I'm just working really quick. I'm tempted to dull down this guy. What if I take this guy out? It's 14. And then dull him down a little bit more, so that door stays like a key read to part of your house there. Okay? All right. And then I'm just going to merge everything together. Just take a look at it real quick. Overkill. That's that old layer. So looking from there, and look, you know, a little bit of, you know, direction of light, good light source, you know, indicating a little bit of clouds in there, really sort of makes the piece sort of pop a little bit. And that's that next level I want you guys to get into. On this one, what I thought would be really cool, if I were to do this really fast, right, would be this. This is how I envisioned this, is you have this cool sort of spooky looking, like mausoleum, whatever. Hold on, I got to get above the layer. Let me go above. So what I thought would be cool on this is if this looked like this was maybe open a little bit, and you get this sort of cool highlight in there, right? And part of that highlight like filters off, and then you see it like wrap over the ground plane, and it's like literally coming over part of this is like this really cool visual read of like a light source, you know. Even some of it might be in here, some of that coming up through here, coming in through part of the ground like this, and basically like light, it's like it's illuminating and hitting all these highs of this road and the dirt and the stone like that, right? So if I hit hide in here and I come back and just sort of start going across, imagine that light just sort of breathing through, coming into little parts here and sort of fading off. You know, you could have a really cool sort of bright light source in the middle there, just like bam. See, and you get that sort of spooky feel in there. You know, I sort of like that house being in there, and if we just come across and hit a little bit more, get some clouds in there on top of there. In fact, let me just hit it with a cloud layer really quick. Let's go real light here to see what happens if I just sort of. Right. For some reason, I find it easier to just do clouds like this on one layer and then move them to where I want them, like that, and I can like transform them. See, and it creates a little bit easier. I control the clouds, right? That little haze over there. So I know there's something about this location. I think it's really easy. You can get in there really quickly. Look at that. And get a pretty cool light feel of what's happening in there because of that, the way you put that center mass in there in terms of the composition, right? Okay, let's go over here to this guy. I had one idea when I was looking at do you have any ideas on this for lighting? I had one idea, or I imagined when I saw this, I was thinking of like, maybe it's Scooby-Doo popping back in my head from being a kid. Because I imagine like a light up here. It looks like someone's digging, or there's a hole in the ground, and you know, looks like they're burying someone. But then again, I think on this piece, what would be pretty strong would be that silhouette of the house is such a strong part of the visual read. Having a couple lights on in there. Maybe you could even, this one, you could definitely get away with, where's Christine Kim? Having a moon in there, right? You could definitely get away with that. You could get a pretty cool, I don't think I have any moons in here. Oh, I do. No. Those are painting brushes. I have a couple right there. You even see them. You could get something. Come on, let's try that again. Maybe. Wait, hold on a minute. I made a mistake. There's something else on that layer. I was going to rotate it, and that would affect that other little sketch here. You can get a nice little moon shape behind there, like that. So can you imagine, actually, I think it'd be cool if it was facing a little bit. Actually, I like it the other way. Maybe like that a little bit. And if you have this, erase here. I don't have your layers, so I'm just going to quickly erase some of this around. That silhouette's really pretty potent right there. I think that could be a great little piece where you have the moon behind there like that, and then you get a little bit of a cloud haze over that moon, right? And then you get some lights on in there. So if we come back up here, let me grab another little soft cloud brush. Okay. Put it on another layer so I can easily get in there and sort of transform it. That's a cool cloud brush like that. Just look at that. I can grab that and just be like, boom. Minimize it and get a little bit of a cool mood. Sort of coming in through there. Just try to do this one really quick. I just copied and pasted it. Just imagine part of that coming through here. Then you need a couple light sources on there. And if you can get that moonlight, maybe it's a teeny bit brighter. Come back to the moon real quick. Get a little bit more of a highlight sort of hitting across there. Because then, once you get that, let me type in moon on there. Sorry, I know my layers really fast. I don't want to merge something. I didn't mean to move. That was from the other one. Here we go. That's cloud. Cloud. Put C for cloud. C for cloud. Moon. That's pretty cool with that moon right there. Can you see how you can get some really nice crisp highlights right there and then fade other stuff off down part of this? Why does it keep, it change brushes, go back. Sorry, I need to stop the recording. I keep changing brushes and nothing's happening. I think the recording's starting to kill the memory that I have here. That's cool. Look, I just put a couple minutes into that and put those clouds in there. Let me grab all those layers together. Just goofing around with it, right? You know, just from there and getting get some really cool highlights right in here that could be coming through part of there. Getting part of this to pop and blend in, and you have that really cool structure. I wish I had your layers though. So if you get the clouds behind there, it'll make that house pop up, right? Make sure part of the upper part of that house isn't the same. See how it's blending into the same value as your sky? Get that sky to maybe lighten up a little bit, especially with that light. So imagine if your house sort of came up here and had a little point on it like this, right? Actually, I did that backwards. I meant to do this. There, just that little haze like that. See how it makes the steeple of the house pop out just a little bit? And then you get that sort of cool haze. Yeah, it's fun. So I'm like popping that out a little bit up in that corner. Just trying to get just a couple little details popping out of there. Get some, maybe that roof has one of those like angled wood or whatever. That's a fun piece too. I want to keep going on it. Anyway, so that's where we ended up, right? Look at that. Erase a little bit of that detail. Get to sort of be suggestive in there. What I need are those. You get those smudge tools back in there, so it makes it really helpful for smearing and blending some of that in there. Okay, cool. So let's zoom out of them. Take a look at where we are. That's pretty cool. I like what's happening over there. I like that second one really quick. Gets a lot of mood in it. I like that third one too. Okay, does that help you out, Charmaine? He's like, can I have the file? Like, no, cool. I think they're really strong compositions. I think you're going to have a lot of fun getting in there and rendering them up. Okay, nice work. All right, let me go back. Let me take a look at Jameson's after I left for a little bit. Yeah, those highlights, Jameson on this, now that I look at it, right? I like some of that stuff in there, a little bit lighter. That's the great thing about leaving your piece for a little bit and coming looking at it with light eyes. You need to, with your light source coming above, you need to really, I do a couple passes. I just threw some really quick highlights on there for that structure, but you need to really get some, you have the roof tiles on there, right? You could have a couple of the windows, that Victorian architecture, they have a lot of pillars. I'd get in there and really get some of that little detail down and then maybe throw it down there and lightly blend it in because that light's coming through there. I mean, part of this is also going to be in silhouette as well, so we can erase a lot of it, but you know, you're going to have some highlights coming in there and some of those shapes getting locked up. I mean, you should be able to see the reflection on a window or two, you know, with that type of an intense light coming from there. See how much fun these are? You get into these and you just want to keep going and working on them and developing more. This actually looks sort of good. I think on yours, you know what? It is further back where you can almost just see the silhouette of it and just hit it with another brush on top just to fade it back like it's almost like a brush or a cloud layer, right? When you have that option where you could do that and it would look pretty convincing. If you just come across this and it's just overlaid by this heavy fog that's coming in here, right? Hold on, let's get something a little brighter. Put it on another layer. So if I make that a little bit smaller and I get it in here, and if I drop the opacity down on that a little bit like so, get a little bit of that foggy sensibility. You can almost like fade in the back like that, which is sort of cool. See how that sort of works like that? Because you already have that fog coming through. What if it's just the light silhouette shape of that house? And I really like this right there. The trees coming over part of that with that walkway in there, you know, I think that's pretty cool. Trying to blend that in a little bit more. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's fun too. All right. Good work, guys.